Hey guys, it's Intricate from AmigaLove.com. Today I wanted to walk you through the weird and wacky world of real-time clocks for the Amiga 1000. Now I know a lot of you watching this are probably thinking, real-time clocks? You mean the death bringer of most Amigas I've ever known? Oh my god, you mean that device that killed so many Amigas? Yes, the real-time clock really is the culprit because that's what all these batteries were put into Amigas over the years. But not for the Amiga 1000. The Amiga 1000 did not have a real-time clock put into the motherboard like a lot of other models did, right? Back in the day, a lot of computer companies, including Commodore, would solder batteries right to the motherboards of their big box machines, and a lot of the all-in-ones like the 500 and the 1200, you could buy upgrades that would put them inside your machine right next to the motherboard. But back in the 80s, the Amiga 1000 sold most of its third-party real-time clocks on the exterior of the box. And if there's a port, somebody made a clock for it. I want to walk you through this really interesting kind of innovative world of how people addressed this problem and made it work with the most beautiful Amiga ever made. Okay guys, so this is not necessarily an exhaustive review of every single real-time clock ever made for the Amiga 1000, but it should demonstrate a pretty wide range of creativity and in product design. The first one I want to show is one of my favorites, and it's from one of my favorite companies that made third-party products for the Amiga, and that's Microbotics. They really knew their shiz. Not only did they make fantastic software, but they also made beautiful hardware that tried very hard to match the curvature, the look and feel of the machine, which I really appreciate. This particular real-time clock goes through the mouse port. You just push it right in. And it has a pass-through right here so that you can still plug in your joysticks or your mouse, right? Which is really, really cool. I also have the original disc, and inside this, it's actually a coin battery that you can replace. Okay. What I really like about this particular model is the fact that it has the same border radius, or darn near close to it. It color matches the case, and even though it's sticking on the outside, it's actually really attractive. Really, really cool, and one of the prettiest real-time clocks I've ever seen for an Amiga 1000. That's the Mouse Time by Microbotics, made in 1987. The next one I want to show you is called A-Time by ASD. Incidentally, all of these that I'm about to show you were made in the United States. In fact, Mouse Time was made out of Richardson, Texas. ASD made out of Beaumont, Texas. A lot of honky-tonk real-time clocks going on in here, you know what I'm saying? What's interesting about this particular model is that it plugs into the parallel port. The Mouse Time plugged into the mouse port. This is solid metal, okay? It's really a solid construction. This is plastic. That being said, they did a good job of color matching, pretty good. And this goes into the parallel port. So let's flip our 1000 around real quickly. And it looks like, when I first pulled it out of the box the first time, I thought, oh yeah, it should just fit perfectly back there, don't you think? Actually, no. It doesn't really fit this way. You have to flip it around and push it right in like this. And so it actually sticks up above the edge of the machine. So if this is the back, obviously. If you're sitting in front of it, you would see some of it hanging up above the edge. But they did a really nice color matching job with the case. That being said, compared to the Microbotics Mouse Time, this is plastic. And the Mouse Time is solid metal, right? Solid metal, beautifully painted with the logo. This one is just cheap plastic, and it has all these like strange grooves, and they didn't really think so much about the looks as much as the functionality. But it does do a really nice job. It has the pass-through, and it doesn't really offer anything else. It's purely just a clock that your machine will seek when you set the software by ASD, Akron Systems Development, right? Back in 1986. This is ancient, just like this machine. So far we've put one into the mouse port or the joystick port. We've also put one into the parallel port. This next one doesn't actually eat up a port at all. What it does, and this is really an interesting approach to this problem. You take your keyboard out, and now this is sort of like a cooking show. I've already disconnected this for you, so you didn't have to watch me do that. But basically, the time saver, right, is this strange looking contraption. And it has two what look like telephone jacks on one side. The keyboard goes into this one. And the other port goes into the back of your machine where the keyboard used to plug into. And so the real-time clock is this guy in between. And if you want, you can actually hide it back here behind this support bar. You can hide it back there and no one will ever even see it. So it's actually a really nice solution that doesn't require popping up the case, utilizing or cannibalizing a port, or at least sticking out of one, even if the others have pass-throughs. You're still starting to put like, hey, my computer's got the mumps. Well, this one, you can go a little more camouflage and hide it inside, up underneath it, and still get your keyboard in there, right? So, pretty cool. Not only that though, the time saver had a ton of extra features beyond just the clock. It had fully programmable backed up macros, right? And they're instant because they're in the battery, they're saved into its little RAM. It doesn't use any Amiga RAM, it just has a little bit that you can save these kinds of instructions on the chip. Like I said before, it doesn't take up any space, doesn't have to, and it works with everything. This is really neat. It had password protection, right? So you could actually create a password that when you turned on your machine, you're not gonna be able to use the keyboard until you type that in. You didn't say the magic word, just like that. It also has auto start macro, which would automatically include selected macro in startup or reboot routine, whatever the hell that means. And then finally, this is kind of neat, it had some command line history and editing. Because it has a little bit of RAM inside the clock, it allowed you to store up to 1,000 kilobytes of CLI commands for retrieval. And there's instructions in that really ridiculous, rather thick manual on how to do all of that stuff in here, which are now forever curled because they've been in that cylinder for 30 some years. But anyway, you can get into all that kind of cool stuff in there. Pretty dang cool. And it's from the CLTD guys in Wichita, Kansas. Okay, now we're getting into probably my favorite from a functionality standpoint, the Starboard 2. Now the Starboard 2 is a lot more than just the option for a real-time clock. At its most basic, it was a RAM expansion, right? It utilized the expansion port on the side of the machine, and in microbotics fashion, solid metal, they really took pains to make sure the border radiuses on the device matched that of the Amiga, color matching it as best they can under the circumstances. And it is just a beautiful RAM expansion at its base, right? You pop that in and you've got essentially either half a meg of RAM, 1 meg of RAM, or up to 2 megs of RAM utilizing what's called an upper deck, which this particular one has. Now, you could stop there, but why stop there? You don't want to stop there. You had the option to upgrade this even further in one of two ways. You could either get what's called a Scuzzy Module, And it was an additional board that popped in here that also had a real-time clock, and it had an external Scuzzy port in the back. I had that hooked up to another machine of mine, and it actually auto boots Workbench 1.3 off of a zip drive. I created a different video for that if you're interested in that kind of stuff. In any case, you could use a Scuzzy module inside there, or you could use what was called a multifunction module, which is this guy. Okay, made in Richardson, Texas, of course. The multifunction module, right, utilized a AAA battery and a real-time clock. It did a lot more than that, though. Once you popped this inside of this case of a Starboard 2, you could use the real-time clock, but then you see there's a place here for an FPU. I've never actually used that myself. Honestly, it'd basically give you a really fancy calculator, but it could also, in theory, support some software, 3D software, and potentially speed up some of the calculations for a 3D scene, for rendering and things like that. It also has the ability to utilize the RAM of your Starboard as a RAM disk. So just like the RAM disk for the Commodore 64 by CMD, that extremely difficult, very rare, and very, very highly desirable device. The reason why those are so cool and why those are so interesting, even in 2020, is that when you turn your machine off, bloop, the code is still there, ready to go the next time you turn it on. Really, really kick-ass concept. And that's, again, why the RAM disk on the Commodore 64 is so amazing. Not only that, but because it's already loaded in RAM, if you decide you want to load one of those programs, it's like that. You're not having to wait for 1541 emulation or any of that business. Anyway, enough of that. But this is the multifunction module, and it also has a place for the AAA battery right there. Hide it inside of here. Nobody really sees it. Now here's the thing. You'll see these Starboard 2s show up. Sometimes it's just the Starboard, which typically are 1 meg of RAM. The Starboard 2 has those 3 RAM options that I described. If it has the upper deck, which is a piece that fits right up in here, that's going to give you the 2 megs. A lot of times folks will have these on, well, not a lot of times. They're actually quite rare, but when you do see them show up on eBay, a lot of times they never open these. This will be missing. It's supposed to be from here, right? You're supposed to take this guy and fit it in there. Like that. Not the same exact color, but at least dust doesn't get in there and things like that, all right? And then you push this into the expansion port. Usually when you see these for sale on eBay, it'll just be like this, maybe a couple pictures and that's it. What you can do if you're looking for the star clock, because that's what this was called, it utilized a program called Star Time and it was called the Star Clock. You'll see parts of the AAA battery housing right below this port. You'll see them just kind of right in there. And if you see that, that's when you're going to catch your breath and go, oh my God, I need that right now. Because these star clocks are really, really hard to find, but they're also super duper cool. When you see Star Time and Star Clock loading on your Amiga 1000 when you're booting it up, it's pretty kick-ass, you guys. Now, there is one caveat to all of that, and here's the software for it. The Star Time and the Star Clock, at least the versions that I've been running, they only go up to somewhere in the ballpark of about 2011 and 2012. I forget the exact date, but if you go beyond that, it will crash the program, and your clock is useless. So I actually have to set my clock into the past, and I believe right now I'm in 2011, and the days match up actually. So it's kind of nice. It'll say Wednesday, da-da-da-da. I'm like, oh my gosh, it is Wednesday. What a nice coincidence. But of course the dates are wrong. The actual year is wrong. But you know, who cares? I'm more about having it work and having the data be time-stamped whenever I'm saving my files on the machine, and that's all that really matters to me anyway. Plus, it's pretty freaking badass. Come on, let's be honest. When you want to install the multifunction module into the Starboard, it actually comes with a chip. This one's still sealed. It's never been removed. That has to be replaced on the Starboard somewhere. And here's the original warranty. Thank goodness I still have this, right? But what's cool about it is it actually shows you a lot of the other products that Microbotics had been making back in the day, back in the late 80s. And we have Starboard 2. They actually made one for the Amiga 500 as well, which is pretty sweet. The upper deck is that extra RAM module that I was telling you about earlier. The multifunction module, which is this, that comes with a real-time clock. The Scuzzy Module, which I described earlier as well, which also has a clock. It has some adapters. There's the FPU chip, the MC68881, which goes back there. And it had a few other things, including even an accelerator, which that's intriguing to me. I probably want to hunt that down at some point just because I love everything Microbotics has ever touched. And of course, the mouse time clock, which we looked at the very beginning. And they even made what looks like a 20 meg hard drive, which was probably made for the Scuzzy module. And can you imagine a Microbotics hard drive? Oh, that'd be so sweet. It'd probably be in a metal case. I'll just take M's all the way across. I'm okay with that. There's also the original user guide, which is really cool for the multifunction module. And it even gets into some really nice diagrams, right, of how everything fits together and how this slides up in there, changing the battery, some really cool macros that they created for the software that you install for when this gets all put together. And finally, they actually used the same box for all these different peripherals that they sold, and there's the multifunction module right there. Back in 1988 or 87, whenever this was made, this would have run 90 bucks brand new, which is about $200 in today's economy, to get you this functionality in your Amiga 1000. And you know why that's cool? It was never soldered onto the damn motherboard. And even though we didn't have a million or a trillion Amiga 1000 sold, but the ones that were sold weren't destroyed by this kind of stuff that killed so many 2000s, 3000s, 4000s, and even 500s and 1200s that had trapdoor expansions put in there with the little batteries. So yay, Amiga 1000. So guys, I hope you enjoyed walking through that portion of my real-time clock collection for the Amiga 1000. I don't know why I've been so obsessed with those, but I think partly it's just because of the diversity of the products people came up with. The way they invented different solutions to solve that problem just completely fascinates me, and from a historical perspective, I really kind of geek out on that. I hope you enjoyed it too, and if you like this video and you want to see more, please subscribe and ring that bell, yo, if you know what I mean. We'll see you next time. Take it easy. Bye-bye. Amiga